What's up guys, Eric Vasquez here from teachmetodesign.com. Now, have you ever been working on a photo shoot or even just taking a family portrait and everybody will look great except you'll have those one or two people whose eyes are like this, or maybe they're looking off in the distance, or just something else that seems a little bit off? Well, in today's video I'm going to be showing you guys something that I enjoy doing very much, and that is dealing with photo compositing. So we're going to start off with some basics, but I'm going to be showing you guys how you can take pieces from different photos to composite them together to get that perfect shot in Photoshop. Alright guys, so as I mentioned in the intro video here, I've got a pretty cool tutorial lined up for you today that deals with basic photo compositing. So, again, if you ever have those, photo shoots or family portraits where you need to take, pieces of one photo and put them into another, this tutorial is going to show you exactly how to go about doing that. So, let's say, for example, you see I've got a few shots here of this model, and we're going to be using this one on the right as our base. I like his pose for the most part, but maybe we want to show him smiling instead of looking serious, and maybe we want to take his arms or his jeans from one of these other shots. I'm going to show you guys how to do that, and we're going to start by working on this image first. The first thing that you're going to want to do is create a silhouette or remove the background. So I tend to use the pen tool and create a work path for myself, and kind of got everything except for the hair, which I then just kind of erased manually. I don't want to spend too much time on that one specific part because we've got a lot of other things to get to. Plus I have several other videos that deal with removing subjects from the background. I'll put a link for some of those in the description. We're going to start there. So we basically have our work path. You can scrap it if you want once you're finished, but now we basically have our subject isolated with just a black background behind him. So before we do anything, I'm just going to make sure to go ahead and save this, and we will just call it, composite tutorial done. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to be looking at are the arms, okay? I want to take the arms from this photo and drop them onto our other image. So the way that we're going to do that is just by kind of quickly making a selection with the pen tool around the arms that we want to use. And again, I like using the pen tool for this. You could, apply a layer mask and use a brush, or try it with the magic wand. But you have to be careful because oftentimes the magic wand doesn't really provide very crisp or clean results like the pen or the brush tool does. So just something to be mindful of as you work. The goal being to get nice clean edges, nice clean lines, because we want this to look believable. There's nothing worse than looking in a magazine or something that looks very obviously photoshopped, and that's part of the goal here when it comes to compositing and retouching and those kind of things, is that you want to have a convincing effect so that people don't really know that it was changed in the first place. So for this tutorial I am actually using a stylus. I just have a Wacom stylus that I like to use, and you can do this with a mouse. You don't feel like you have to use a tablet, especially because I'm just kind of clicking and dragging and making points. There's not a ton of brush work that you guys will have to do for this, but I basically just wanted to get the ball rolling and have a starting point here so that we can start to make our selection. So I'm just going to finish tracing this, and I'm going to ignore the shadow here on the inside of the arm for now. We will be brushing that in manually after, once we kind of have our composite image in a better place. So I like using the Wacom tablet because it just feels a little bit more like you're using a pencil and paper. It's a little less strenuous on your wrist as opposed to just using a mouse. And yeah, it takes a little while to get used to, but once you do, I think it's really great. So if you guys don't have a tablet or you haven't used one before, I highly encourage you to get one to use. So Once I've made my path with the pen tool, you can come over here to the Paths tab in your palette, and you'll see that you should have a work path. So what you can do then is hold down the Command key or Control on a PC, and then come back to your Layers tab and press Command or Control J. And that will basically take your selection and put it on a new layer, which we will then bring over into our working document. We're just going to call it New Arms, and then we're actually going to go ahead and minimize that for a moment. And the next thing that we're going to want to do is grab our head from this layer. So with this selection, you don't have to be quite as precise. I'm just going to use the lasso tool, grab a big chunk here, and then again press Command J and drag that over into our file. So I'm going to close that, and now we basically have, the three pieces that we need. Okay, so here we've got our silo, and we've got our new arms. So what I want to do first is kind of try and line up the arms so that they look natural. In order to do that, you might want to resize it a little bit, play around with the rotation just to try and match it up with all of the angles here in our base layer. I'm going to rotate it, and somewhere around there looks pretty good. Once you have your arms or whatever that you're bringing into your composite roughly in place, we're going to put a layer mask on our base layer. Alright, and this is where you can use the brush or again the pen tool, and we're going to begin by hiding most of the arms on the layer below our new arms, if that makes sense. Hiding the arms in the layer below the new arms. Alright, so I'm just painting with black to kind of get rid of most of that, and we're going to handle the hands and the pockets and everything like that pretty soon. But one thing at a time. It's a process, and in order to get this to look good, we have to spend a little bit of time on each piece separately. Alright, so now that we have our arms roughly in place, you'll notice that we have these stripes on the shirt, which we actually want to get rid of. We just want to have this white t-shirt be the main article of clothing on our model. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new layer just above the new arms layer. And I'm going to come over here and choose the Spot Healing Brush tool. Now, you want to make sure that you have Content Aware and Sample All Layers both checked off. And now, you don't have to hold down Alt or Option or anything. You can just start painting on top of the stripes. And you might have to make a couple of passes just to clean it up and make it, look a little bit better. But, this is basically all you have to do. You just kind of paint over it. Photoshop is going to look at the pixels that are around where you're brushing and pretty much try to fix those areas and figure out what you're trying to do, what you want to cover up. So I'm just going to use this technique to paint over the stripes here until we can get rid of them. I don't think that this tool by itself will be able to fix everything, but it will certainly give us a really good start. Well, we'll probably still have to go back in and sample a few pieces just to fill in some patches, but it's going to do a lot of the work for us. So this is one of the quickest ways that I've found of doing this, even though it's not 100% effective all the time. It kind of took a chunk out of our model's shoulder. Then we're just going to come over to the other side and repeat the same process. So this technique also works really well if you wanted to remove tattoos or scars off of a person, or if you have other areas that you want to cover up or remove. It's kind of like doing a like a content aware fill, if you're familiar with that in Photoshop. And again, it's just using some of the built-in functions to kind of examine our image and figure out what areas we can sample from to cover it up. So Photoshop can be pretty smart sometimes, and again, it's not always about using just one tool for the job. Sometimes it's a combination of different tools and techniques. As you're seeing here, it's looks a little bit messy, but we're going to be able to fix this all up. I think you can then decrease or increase the size of your brush using the bracket keys to go over different areas that need a little bit more refining. And just pay attention to the edges and the folds in the shirt and things like that. It'll all work out. Okay, so again, just kind of jumping back and forth between both sides here to try and match this up as good as we can. What we're going to do is just try to get rid of this last bit of blue in here. Alright, so we have something like that. So again, not 100%, but you can see that it's done a lot of the work for us. So what we can do now is actually make a copy of the new arms layer by selecting it, then pressing Command J. Then we're going to hold down the Shift key and select our copy along with the layer above it and press Command E. And that's basically just going to merge these two layers together. So what we want to do now is hold down the Command key and click on the layer thumbnail, and that will give us a selection around our whole shirt. Okay, so what I'm doing now is pressing S on the keyboard to switch over to the clone stamp, and we're just going to use that to come back in and fill in some of the gaps here. So like over here on the shoulder, I'm just going to hold down the Alt Option key and click on an area that's nice and clean, and then paint over the area that I want to cover up. And by selecting the layer thumbnail first, it's going to make sure that all of our sampling and everything happens within the shape of our selection. Okay, so this area can be a little bit tricky when you're dealing with folds and clothing and things like that. Not impossible, but it definitely just takes a little bit more finessing. You want to try your best to go in there and be clean with it. It's not always going to be perfect, but it does a pretty good job using a combination of these two techniques. Okay, so again, this side we have to fill it in with a little bit of our shirt texture. And the reason I'm using the clone stamp instead of just painting is because we will be able to get a bit of our shirt texture, which we want to show through and look pretty natural. That's why we're doing that. Okay. So we're just going to continue painting here to get the creases in the shirt, and then I'm going to increase or decrease the size of my brush a little bit more to try and fill in the gaps. As I do this, I'm just covering up some of the folds and the wrinkles in the t-shirt and just kind of zooming in to make sure that I get everything to look pretty good. So as you're working, you will probably encounter a few times where you may wish to sample something from your original layer below. So there's a couple things you can do. You can either come in here with add a layer mask to your copy layer here, and you can always paint in with black. Paint in with black to kind of reveal the layer below using your brush tool. And then you can just kind of repeat the part with the healing brush in order to get rid of those stripes. I want these kind of folds and creases in here, but I don't want the part that comes with it. So I'm going to create a copy of the new arms layer, just merge it with the version that we were working on before, and then once again switch to the spot healing brush tool, and then we're just going to do what we did before and come in and paint. This time I'm just going to make the brush a little bit smaller in order to hopefully get a little bit more accurate with it. So you see here it kind of works a little bit better the more precise that you get. Be a little patient when you do this kind of work. It can be a little tedious at times, but ultimately it'll look pretty good when we're done. Alright, just going to cover that up, merge these two layers, and then once again we will go back to our clone stamp tool in order to fill this out. Right, and all we want to do right here is just get that line so that you see the fold in the t-shirt. Right, and that's really the trickiest part, is just getting it to blend and look nice and even. But one other thing to mention is that when you have your clone stamp tool selected, just like our brush, you can adjust the hardness of it. So by holding down Shift and using the left and right brackets, you can either get a soft edge brush or a hard edge brush. For this I'm going pretty soft by using the left bracket, and if I want to increase the hardness of it, I will use the right bracket. Okay, so starting to look a little bit better, right? And we're just going to cover up some of these other folds here to blend that all together and make it look a little bit smoother. Okay, so if I zoom out, it's not looking too bad compared to, let's see where we started, that. So again, not 100% perfect all the time, but does a pretty good job. I'm going to do what I did before in order to get some of these folds back on this side of the body because we lost a little bit of that in here. So again, what I'll do is select the arms, the original layer, and make a copy. Come to our working layer that we're using to cover it up and apply a layer mask by clicking down there. And then I'm just going to switch back to my brush tool, B on the keyboard, and paint with a solid black to try and find those folds. You don't have to worry too much about being like spot on because you can always come back in with your white brush after to paint some of this back out. So I'm going to make my brush soft, switch back to white, and just get a little bit of this painted out. Okay. And then what we're going to do from here is repeat what we did before. So hold down the Shift key, select that layer and the copy below and press Command E, and then come back to the Spot Healing brush tool and just continue painting on top of the stripes here. Okay, so once you're happy with that, I'm going to switch back to the Clone Stamp tool, S on the keyboard, and just extend some of these folds and wrinkles, smooth out a little bit of these areas here that look kind of bumpy, just to retain some of the shirt texture, but make it blend with our white t-shirt a little bit better. I think that this side of the arm still looks a little bit too grayish. The colors and the textures aren't quite matching up exactly the way we want. So I'm just going to continue to use the stamp tool in order to fill that out. So again, holding down the Alt Option key and sampling an area that you like, and then just simply painting over the areas that you want to cover up. Now that's looking a lot better. We're going to work off of this layer, call it New Arms, and one thing that I want to do is hold down the Alt Option key and click on the adjustment layer, and then we're going to choose Curves, and check off this box that says Use Previous Layer to create clipping mask, hit OK, and I just want to increase the contrast, and I'm just focusing on this area over here, okay? Don't pay attention to anything else except for that area. Make sure that our mask is selected and then press Command I to invert it, and then switch back to your brush tool, make sure that you have solid white, and we're just going to paint over this sleeve here, this shoulder area, and that's going to lighten it up so that it matches the rest of the shirt a little bit better. Okay, because we want it to be almost, pure white. Okay, you can take a look before and after. That's helping. I'm going to lower the opacity of the brush a little bit and just blend that a little bit better. And you can see we're looking pretty good so far. So we've pretty much got our new arms in there, but what I want to do now is kind of work on covering up these hands and filling out the shirt down here. So before I do that, I'm going to select my Scylla layer and press Command J to make a copy, turn off the layer below, and since we painted out our arms in the beginning, I'm going to actually apply this layer mask by holding down Control, clicking on the layer mask thumbnail, and hitting Apply Mask. And now if I were to hold down Command and click on the thumbnail, I would have this new selection here. So what we're going to do is come back to our Clone Stamp tool, and we're just going to sample some areas of the shirt that we like. And I'm going to increase the opacity to about 80% just by pressing 8 on the keyboard. And I'm going to, slowly start to paint out the hands. All right, so holding down Option, painting over the hands, just to get those out of the way. Okay, and we can kind of refine the edges of this later, but for now I just want to try to sample some areas that have a little bit of shading on the edge, so it doesn't look, flat like pure white. Now this area on the bottom where the shirt ends and the jeans begin, you can kind of hold down Option and click on an area that covers the line that kind of overlaps, and then you'll see just before you paint you'll get a little preview. So that can be really helpful when you're trying to do this. I'm just going to paint over some of the jeans, select something down here, and just kind of fill in this area with some of this denim texture. Okay, just doing the same thing. Hold down Alt Option, select an area that I like, and then paint over it. Okay, and you don't have to be super careful on your first pass, because you can always come back and cover it up again as you need to. So again, I'm going to click on an area of the shirt where I like that seam, and then just try to continue the line as best as you can to make it look more subtle and natural. Again, this can be a little bit time consuming. It's a little bit like rinse and repeat, but if you take your time to try and do a good job on it, it'll really make a difference in your final photo. Right, and I'm just making a second pass to kind of cover up any edges that look a little bit blurry or distorted. So we want to have that nice clean edge along the bottom of the shirt here. Just try to use that preview to line it up as best as you can. So you get something like that, okay? And same thing with the pockets here. You can kind of make another pass to cover up any areas where the hand is still showing a little bit, or you're getting a little bit of that skin from before. Hold down Alt Option, hover the mouse over a part of the shirt that you like, and then just begin brushing out on top of the hand. So I'm just going to add another layer mask to this silo copy layer. Grab my brush tool and hold down the Shift key while tapping the right bracket to get a nice hard edge. And I'm going to zoom in and just paint over this with black. Add a little bit of a curve here. Again, this is a little bit easier with a stylus, but of course you can do this with a mouse as well. The goal being to just make it look kind of natural, or as natural as you can. Excuse me. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. You'll see where we're at. So I'm going to select this silo copy layer, and then hold down Shift and select your curves layer, and then press Command E to merge those all together. So if I turn on the layer below now, I can toggle this on and off. Oops, let me turn off this, disable the layer mask so you can see what we started with, and then where we are now. So already we've started to build this up, and it's looking pretty good. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is hide that, and we're going to work on the face. I'm going to select the new head layer, make a copy of it by pressing Command J, Control if you're working on a PC, and I'm going to press 5 on the keyboard, and that's going to lower my opacity to about 50%. Then I'm going to press Command T to do a free transform, and hold down the Shift key while dragging inwards from any of the 4 corners or handles of your bounding box. Alright, and what we're trying to do here is just kind of line up the features, where the nose would be, where the eyes would be, and trying to make it roughly the same size, just so it looks, the proportion looks about the same. Okay, and it's not going to line up perfectly, but we're going to be hiding most of this. So the technique we're going to do here is to use an inverted layer mask. So hold down the Alt Option key and then click on the layer mask tool, or the layer mask button down here on the palette. Alright, and then we're going to grab our brush tool, solid white, and then make it softer by holding down Shift in the left bracket, tapping it a few times. And let's just lower the opacity of our brush to, say, 40% by pressing 4 on the keyboard. Now when I start to paint this in, we're going to be basically revealing the features from the layer below. So I'm just kind of starting with the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, as those are the key features here that we want to try and line up. And you can see here on the side of the face that it's not really lining up as well as it could be. So I'm going to click on this little link in between the layer mask and the image to unlink those so that I can just modify the image without messing up our mask. And I'm just holding down Shift and dragging outwards from the corner, bottom left corner and then the top right corner, to scale it up a bit. Alright, and just kind of realigning our face. Alright, so you can see, that's starting to look a little bit better. Then we're just going to relink those and continue painting with our black and white on the layer mask. Okay, so just painting a little over the neck here, painting on top of the forehead. And I kind of like the hair from the original image, so I don't want to cover up too much of that. Alright, so pretty quickly and easily we've kind of swapped in a whole new face here, and it looks pretty natural, I think. You can refine the edges a little bit more, just painting over the neck. And I'm just holding down Command and clicking on the layer thumbnail for this layer, the merged layer, so that I don't go outside of those boundaries when I'm painting. Okay, and if you do, you can always invert it and then just paint with black, and that's going to take care of those edges. You can see now that we have a pretty good composite going. I'm going to merge these together, and again, just look at the before and the after, and we're looking pretty good. So let's see if there's any other pieces that we want to use from our other image. I'm wondering how that would look in our composition. So I'm going to press W on the keyboard to get the magic wand tool, and then just click on some of this white in the background. Hold down Shift and then click in between the legs here to add to the selection. And then we're going to invert it by pressing Command-Shift-I or Control-Shift-I on a PC, and then pressing Command-J to make a new layer with our selection. From here, make a selection just around the lower part of the torso and the jeans here, and then do that one more time. Command or Control plus J. I'm going to drag the jeans over into our working layer, and I'm just going to try to roughly get these in place, kind of see how it looks. It's a slightly darker denim. It's not a huge difference, but we can swap it out just to have another piece here that looks good. What I want to do is add a layer mask to our composite layer on the bottom. Grab my brush tool and just paint with black, and that's going to get rid of the jeans and some of these edges here. We want to basically hide everything below our new pants. Okay, and then we're going to do the same by selecting the new jeans and adding a layer mask, and then we're going to paint out any of these areas that are overlapping the top of our image. Okay, and I messed up a little bit here on the bottom, so I'm just going to go back in with white, bring that back in, clean up the edges a little bit. Okay, something like that. Alright, and you can see as I turn that layer on and off, it's showing me the layer below. So if you did mess up, you can always paint in some more of that by using the white brush instead of black. If you just want to bring in some more of the shirt, maybe you took out too much, it's really easy to just go back in and kind of regain that. So this time lower the opacity of the new jeans so that I can see the layer below, and I want to paint with black on top of that so that I can see the shirt that I just brought back in. And we are looking pretty good, guys. So I'm going to zoom out, so we've got some new pants there. I'm going to select that layer along with the one below it, press Command E once again to merge those together. Now you can see the before and after. Now I'm just going to save that real quick and then come back in here because there's a few things that we need to do. We need to add the shadows back in here, both on the inside and below the arms. Now in a way I kind of messed up by merging that together because I really could have used that selection in order to put in the shadows below the arms here. So instead I'm going to have to come back in with the pen tool and just kind of make a new path for myself that I can use. once you close your path, I'm going to hold down Command and press Enter, and that's just going to activate a selection around our path. And then go ahead and add a new layer, switch back to your brush tool, make it nice and big by pressing the right bracket, and we want to make it softer. So once again, the same shortcut as before, hold down Shift, tap the left bracket a few times. Now I just want to sample maybe some of the skin color because I don't want to use a pitch black shadow. So maybe I'll sample some of this shadow here, and I am just toggling back and forth between the eyedropper and the brush by holding down Alt Option and clicking in there. So kind of getting under the arms and trying to make it gradually darker and darker the closer we get to the arms, just to make a more convincing looking shadow. All right, and if I zoom out, I can always actually come back and compare it to, where's my other image? Yeah, so let's open this image back up just so that we can use it as kind of a reference for where our shadows are. Okay, so I'm going to turn that back on, come back in with my brush tool, and just try and finesse it a little bit more. Okay, so I'm just backing up. I undid it a few times so I could come back in, brush that in here. Let's see, we went outside the edges a little bit, so I'm just going to press Command on the layer thumbnail and mask it. Apply the mask. You know what is even better is applying a layer mask to that and then using a low opacity brush to just kind of smooth out some of the lines here. There you go. So that's looking pretty good. And then we have one other area that we need to add these shadows to on the inside of the arm. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. Create a quick path with the pen tool and just follow the contour of the bicep here and this little piece of the hand that comes in. You know, you don't have to be too careful on this middle part here because we're not going to have a lot of shadow over the chest. Go ahead and close the path, press Command Enter, make a new layer, and then we're going to use our other image as a guide once again to help us, help tell us where the shadows should be. So I'm using the same shadow color as before and just keeping it closer to the edge for where I want it to be the darkest and making a few passes to gradually build it up. I'm going to do the same thing and just add a layer mask and gradually paint out a little bit of that shadow just to blend it more with the original. All right, I'm going to do that here and here. And then I'm going to select my top layer, hold down Shift, select our working composite layer, and press Command plus E or Control E on the keyboard if you're on a PC. And that's going to merge everything together. So now we can close this photo, and you'll see that we have a nice composited image. So from here, there's a few other adjustments that I can make just to enhance this even further. You can now kind of proceed as you would if you were normally retouching a photo. So the first thing that I want to do is actually add a curves adjustment layer. So select your composite, click on the adjustment layer icon and choose curves. And then we're just going to add a bit of punch to it by kind of dragging this middle point down and to the right slightly. And that's going to give us a little more contrast there. And if I hold down the Alt Option key and hover in between the curves adjustment layer and the composite layer, I'll get this icon here, which will allow me to add a clipping mask. And all that means is that this curves layer is only going to affect this layer that it's attached to. But now if I select the composite layer and I add another adjustment layer, let's say we want to add a hue saturation, it's going to automatically have a clipping mask to it because I've placed it in between both of those layers. So I'm just going to boost the saturation a little bit, maybe up to 8, 6 to 8, and I think that looks pretty good. Now let's say we wanted to, change the color of the shirt so it's not a solid white. Well, what we can do is come back down here and choose solid color, and let's just make it like a red to start so that we can see what we're doing. Now I'm going to select the layer mask and press Command I to invert it, and then just use my brush tool, increase the hardness of it, and I'm just going to begin to paint, I have to increase the transparency of the brush too by pressing 0 to get 100%, and I just want to quickly and kind of roughly paint over the area where the shirt is. Okay? You don't have to be super accurate on your first pass, you just want to kind of, roughly start to block it in. Alright, so that's what we're going to do here. And we're going to come back in, you can change the color of this, And we'll probably want to change the blending mode as well from normal to maybe multiply or color or something else other than normal so that it blends with our shirt. Okay? So now that we've made our first pass, let's just quickly see what some of these blending modes look like. We can hold down Shift and use the plus and minus keys to just kind of quickly go through. But I think, we'll probably want to stick with multiply for now. That seems to be looking pretty good. And it also allows us to see if there's any areas that we missed or areas that we need to, to remove. So I'm going to make this brush a little bit softer, and then I'm just going to erase some of this color here that we accidentally overlapped onto the arm. And then we're going to come in here and work on the neck. All right, this kind of collar line needs to be cleaned up as well. All right, and if you are using a stylus and you're having trouble kind of getting in some of these curved areas, a good shortcut is to press R on the keyboard, and it'll actually let you rotate your entire image so that you can brush, a little more naturally. All right, and I use this a lot, especially if I'm, painting or doing this kind of stuff, because sometimes it can be hard to brush in certain directions. I'm right-handed, so sometimes it's a little awkward for me to paint, downwards or like making, brush strokes towards the left. So this is a good way for me to be able to paint and navigate around the screen. And, while you're zoomed in and rotating the image, you can also press the space bar, and that will give you this, hand so that you can just kind of quickly move from one part of your image to another. So again, it's really a combination of these tools and shortcuts that will ultimately enable you to work faster and more efficiently. All right, and once you're happy with it, you can just kind of rotate it back, and it should kind of snap into place. You'll feel it kind of snapping once you're back to where you were. All right, so let's just take another look here. Make sure things are looking good. And we'll zoom out by pressing V and 0 on the keyboard. And I think I need to just clean up a little bit more on the forearms here. Looks like I missed a couple of spots. Let's take another look here. I'm going to zoom out. Press R to rotate this right side up. And then I'm just going to take one more look down at the shirt and the seams here. Go ahead and zoom out. And now if you want to, you can just double click on this and change the color of the shirt to anything you want. So, it's really nice having that flexibility of using adjustment layers. And you can also play around with the opacity. Maybe you lower it to around 80% so it doesn't look quite so intense. But now let's add a new layer, and we'll just fill our background with a solid white. And that also kind of helps to show us this little piece down here that we kind of messed up a little bit. So I'm going to select my composite layer, press Command J, and then I will just simply grab the layer behind it with the clone stamp tool and sample parts of the jeans and everything like that here that we can just fill in really quickly. And there you go. What I want to do is basically create a shadow so it looks like he's standing against a wall. So I'm going to hold down Command and click on the layer thumbnail, make a new layer on top of the document, and then we're just going to switch over to our shadow color, this kind of brownish color here, and with that set as the foreground, press Alt-Option, and that's basically going to fill our entire composite layer with that shadow color. So now I'm going to move that down below everything else and come up to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. All right, and I want to not go crazy with it, but maybe add around 25 pixels or so. And I'm going to hold down Shift and tap it down a few times. All right, just to kind of offset the shadow a little bit. And then we'll come back up once again to Filter, Blur, but this time we'll do a Motion Blur. Now I want to set an angle of 90, so it's going straight up and down. Then just increase the distance to around 145 or so. Okay? Again, I'm just going to tap it down a little bit more. And we don't really want the shadow to be so intense on top, so I'm going to add a layer mask, press G on the keyboard, and I'm going to select a linear gradient that fades from black to transparent, like here. Okay, and then I'm going to basically click up where the head is, hold down the Shift key, and drag down. Alright, and that's going to fade the shadow out as we come down. You can also do this manually using your brush tool, changing the opacity to maybe around like 20%, and then just kind of brushing out any areas where the shadow looks a little bit too intense. Alright, so it's really kind of about, these subtle things that are going to make the image look more convincing. Alright, so I think that looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit more, a little bit more over the arm here. You'll notice one other thing is that we have a little bit of like white on the edges here. So if we want to take care of that, I'm just going to press Command and click on the layer thumbnail once again, and come up to the Select menu, choose Modify, Contract. Let's contract it by about 2 pixels, and then click on the layer mask. And we'll have to do the same for the layer above it. Just hold down Command this time and select on the mask thumbnail, and then add a layer mask to that composite layer. One other little area here. Whoa, it's like intense, man, like really zoomed in pretty far there, but I'm just going to switch back to my brush tool and paint out this little area here on the inside of the jeans, just so we can get rid of that white edge. Okay. Zoom out. Now I'll select my curves layer, hold down Shift and come all the way down to our shadow layer and press Command G to put that into a group folder. Alright, so the last thing we can do here is just kind of lower the opacity of the shadow a little bit, maybe to about 80%, and then we're going to take our white background layer and we'll throw it in this group folder with our other composite layers. Let's see if I can remove these 2 layers, double click the background layer, I'll just quickly name that Original, save it, and you can see where we started and where we ended up. So that's the before and the after. And I think that looks pretty good, guys. So hopefully you have enjoyed this compositing tutorial. I think there's a lot of stuff here that you guys would hopefully be able to use in your own work. If you did enjoy the video, please give us a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Be sure to sign up for the email list as well and be the first to know anytime that new content or tutorials come out. And thank you guys again for watching. So I appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time.